So is racism still used by capitalism? Quite clearly. And if we looked at the history of racism, you could see at the very inception of capitalism that the main motor that drove the Industrial Revolution in this country and in Europe was slavery. Places like Liverpool, Manchester, Bristol gained their wealth that led to them being prosperous industrial capitalists of the world, and being the workshop of the world was built on the money that they made treating other human beings like animals and cattle. And they did that. I don't need to go into the circular trade with you about how they did it. Millions died in the process of slavery. Not only that, it was a subjugation that went with it. I don't know whether you get the chance. I'd recommend you watch it. Harriet, movie about Harriet Tubman was on the iPlayer. You can still watch it on the iPlayer. Recommend it. It goes through the degradation about being a slave, how they dehumanised you, how they treated you as one of their chattel, how they raped women as part of their property, how they viewed you subhuman. They even developed an ideology to go with it. We in that form of racism, they claimed that black people had a different bone structure, that we had different blood even, that somehow we weren't as human. We weren't humans, we were some form of animal that could be treated this way. That was the only way they could justify it. At the same time as enlightenment, at the same time as saying that every man is equal under God, unless you happen to be black when you're not really a man and you can't be treated in that way. That was the ideological justification for slavery, that somehow these people weren't the same human beings as us. And it was done not because, there's no rational basis to this. I often, wonder, I naively, when I was a kid, remember going to school and saying, don't really understand apartheid, just because these people have got a better suntan than the other people, why they be, obviously very naive of me, yeah, but it just didn't seem logical. Why would it be logical to treat someone differently because of the colour of their skin? It doesn't make any logical sense at all. But then capitalism isn't logical. It's about the pursuit of profit. It's about subjugating people to be able to exploit them. And if you're going to do that on a mass scale, then the idea is to develop a whole set of other reasons why you haven't got enough to live on, or you're, so they don't say, well, we're going to go into Iraq and murder these people because of oil, They don't say that to us. They tell us they're doing it because they're worried about women's rights, or that they're worried that there could be weapons of mass destruction that could be flown with so many minutes that will destroy all our planet. Not that they're the ones with the nuclear weapons, or we're the ones with the nuclear weapons, not the ones to be worried about, but somehow it's all turned around. And Marx described it really well, that the discovery of gold and silver in America, the enslavement and entombment in mines of the Aboriginal population, the beginnings of conquest and looting of the East Indies, the turning of Africa into a warren for commercial hunting of black skins, signal the rosy dawn of a new era of capitalist production. Very clearly laid out the links between the two, and they've always been linked in terms of their development. You could look at any probably world event where there's been war, racism in our history, and see that actually that has been used as justification to it. I think from the age of slavery, obviously racism isn't the same as it was then. It's developed in different ways, partly due to the resistance that came about. Slavery came to an end because people in Haiti originally rose up and defeated a French army that was in their country. They went on to defeat a Spanish army, a British army, I think the French and British again, before they got their liberation. It's a heroic struggle of slaves against slave owners. If you get a chance to read it, it's The Black Jacobins. It's a book by C.L.R. James. It's a must in terms of understanding it. And it tells you a lot about the system, doesn't it? Because not only do they want to exploit people that live on this planet, but they are ruthless about about fighting amongst themselves for that, you know. So if you ever get a chance, there's an exhibition in Liverpool, a permanent slavery exhibition there, and I was like shocked to find out that the biggest death toll, the highest rate per death for black worker, slave, was in Brazil. That's because the Portuguese were trying to keep pace with the British and the French, and to do so they had to kill even more black people, treat them even more inhumanely, to be able to try and keep up with making profits at the same rate as the British and French were. Obviously, they weren't able to maintain that forever. So built into this system is that then their class competing with each other. Notice I'm not mentioning any governments at this point, not that they don't play a role, but as you would have noticed from Liz Truss's experience in the last few weeks, when capitalism wants to do something, it doesn't mind who it screws over. At the moment, you know, you can enjoy the spectre of it being Liz Truss, but mark my words, they're going to be coming for us soon enough once they've dealt with her. So they don't really care. And I'm talking about how capitalism and the people that control and run our world, our multinationals, oil companies, Coca-Cola, all these people act in a way. You know, if you ever want to read about the history of coups in South America, you have to know about Coca-Cola, amazingly enough, to be able to understand the relationship between the two. And often it causes as well, the way they promote these ideas is to cause division on our side. You know, don't blame me that you can't afford your heating bill or that you can't afford your dinner tonight. That's the fault of those refugees over there that are coming across the channel. You know, they're to blame at the moment. They're taking away our jobs or our housing. That's why you can't get an appointment at the health service. It's got nothing to do with the fact that we're ripping it to shreds. We're getting private companies to run it that don't even know what they're doing. We give 43 billion for someone to do test and tracing COVID, and I don't know anyone that actually benefited from that process whatsoever, but it's pocketed by multinational quite gracefully, and actually black people died disproportionate of COVID and they didn't really care. In fact, the government went on to say that actually the disproportionate death of black people has got nothing to do with institutional racism, because institutional racism doesn't exist anymore. It's a figment in your minds, if you believe that that's what they literally told us, and that actually we did those African people a favour because they went through that experience of slavery, that made them stronger human beings, supposedly. This is in the Saul report last year, where the Tory government denied institutional racism. This is their logic that they put forward to argue for it. And so they created those divisions all the time. And it'd be wrong for me to say, well, actually, those divisions don't work. Well, they do work, don't they? If you looked at the stats at the moment, those suffering from hate crime, I deal in my trade union role with black members that face racial discrimination at work. Some of it's overt, you know, some of it's, you know, name calling, what have you. Some of it's you don't get the same overtime, you get given the worst shifts, you don't get the same level of supervision and support in your job role, you're less likely to progress in your career in your job role. All those things are probably even more prevalent than the actual name calling. But that's throughout how they try and divide us. So those things do exist. It's part of their divide and rule strategy, and it particularly swerves the question about why our institutions are racist in this country. I mean, I don't know whether anyone heard the figure of it's over 600 cases in London Met of racism and misogyny from police officers that are still in the force. And the woman who did the report, I'm not a fan of Louise Casey, to be honest with you. She was responsible for ASPOs, for those of you that can remember that ridiculous policy of the Labour government. She came out and said that actually that she only bothered trawling the amount of cases that it happened 5 times or more, and they still hadn't taken any action against those police officers that have been involved in that. The Met police officer, I haven't got time to go into it, the Met police officer came out and said that there were a few rotten apples, and that they were going to do their best to root it out. It isn't a question of a few rotten apples, it's a question of an institution that behaves in a certain way, because it's an interest of capitalism to have a police force built on ignorance to actually divide, and actually they are a repository for all the worst ideas in society, aren't they? about gay people, about women, about black people. You know, it's like a bigots charter to join the police force in this country. So it's not a question of just somehow what a few bad apples got in there. They literally go around shooting black people, don't they? So, you know, and that's covered up clearly because those 600 people are still working for the Met somewhere at the moment, aren't they? So it's not something that I get it at work. I mean, we're going to organise some unconscious bias training. And I'm going, look, maybe you need to deal with the conscious bias first before we get onto the unconscious stuff. Maybe you need to deal with the institution itself that promotes it before starting this. But this is all about individualising the problem. It's someone's bad idea in their head. It's nothing to do with the institution, the way that capitalism runs, that creates that division. But I do believe that actually all workers have an interest. I'm not looking for white workers to become an ally in my fight against racism. I'm looking actively for solidarity. Yes, they can't experience what racism is like if they're not black, but they can understand why it's wrong within society, and they can offer effective solidarity to try and get rid of it, because it's in their interest to do so. As Marxists, that's what we believe. We believe, so if you looked at the southern states of America, you'd have to say that both black and white workers get paid less than they do than the north. Why is that? It comes about because if you accept that somehow the black person you're working next to is your enemy, you're not going to unite with them to fight for better wages or better terms and conditions, or to get rid of the system altogether that's exploiting both of you. So, you know, you may be a few pennies, you may not have. And again, I don't agree with the term white privilege. It's not a privilege not to be arrested by the police or not to be shot by the police. Not always true. I know people were discussing last week's meeting about the miners' strike and things. You know, when the state wants to clamp down on someone, they will go for anyone that they believe is to be the enemy within, and often it is workers. How am I doing for time? I'm okay. Cool. Right, okay. So hopefully, we've thrown some of this stuff out there because a lot of it's modern terminology in it about race. Will hopefully inspire some discussion around this. So we went through a period where we've gone through a period originally where slavery was used as a device for racism. Then we went through the colonialism phase, right? Where once we've thrown that mask off, then they said, oh, well, look, we'd love you to let you run your country, but really, do you know what you're doing? Don't you need us to do it for you? I had one idiot lecturer once when I was at Poly, many years ago, some Polys, probably gives my age away, who told me, this is on a degree course, mind you, that Britain gave the world railways. And I put my hand up and I went, you only gave railways to take people's goods out of their country so you can make profit on them. You weren't doing them a favour, you know, like you'd civilised them. We wouldn't know how to build a railway without the British telling us how to do it, doing us a favour. Our whole history is littered with blood on our hands through imperialism and colonialism. Obviously, the biggest example for the UK is what they did to India. There's a really good like an iPlayer thing on the radio that goes through, because it was 75 years of partition earlier this year, that goes through not what the British did to the partition, but that bastard decline of India and everything that went on with the mutiny in 1857, right through to the massacre in Jalwala. It goes through all that stuff, and it is shocking. Again, how a subhuman way they treat other human beings for pursuit of profit. I remember when I found out a few years ago, and I didn't realise this, but someone did a meeting, I think it was Tony Cully wrote a book about Churchill, and I didn't realise, my mum was in Calcutta at the time, as a kid, when they literally allowed 1.5 million people to die so they could free the British Army during the Second World War. And you know, these things are shocking in terms of their disdain for other people's lives. And it isn't just a question for me looking at the different ways that capitalism has developed itself, because part of it has been forced by response. You know, they had to do things differently once the Haitian Revolution happened. Yeah, they had to do things differently when most of Africa rose up post World War II and demanded its independence. Yeah, there were fighters that came about that fought for their liberation. But what capitalism does is it finds another way to screw you, doesn't it? Yeah. So, Now we let you run your country yourself, but we've got the IMF there to help you. Yeah? We'll give you a structural adjustment programme. We'll make you starve your people so we can bring in multinationals. We'll actually run the most, basic economy that makes the most money, and we'll take those profits ourselves, yeah? So, the horrible thing about Iraq, apart from the millions of people that died first through sanctions and then through war, is now all their oil fields are run by Halliburton and by American multinationals. They don't actually own their own oil fields anymore, do they? They're not making any money out of them. It's made for American capital to make those money. That's what they tried to secure through that invasion. So they find different ways, but it throws up at every point a whole series of people that we look to for inspiration in those struggles that fought back. Whether it was Toussaint Louverture that led the Haitian Revolution, whether it was C.L.R. James who wrote about him, whether it was, I know, a pamphlet for Walter Rodney, that was involved in the Pan-African movement in the 70s that fought against colonialism in Africa and in the West Indies. All those people have thrown up people, and particularly in America, the Black Panther Party, Angela Davis. These were all people that we looked to, the tradition we wanted to point out. People that understood there was a connection between race and class, and that we needed to unite to be able to overthrow the system that created racism. Because there is no way to get rid of racism like getting rid of the system that tries to divide us at every opportunity. We need that unity of bringing black and white people together to be able to fight for a common future. And it's more important than ever, isn't it, to do that now at the moment. Not just because we're living in a more and more racist world with more and more right-wing governments about, but actually those same governments are the ones that are telling us that we're going to have to keep burning fossil fuels because we really need to keep the profits going for our petrol companies, our multinationals. And actually, they're willing to go that far, aren't they? To defend their system, they're willing to go as far as destroying the whole system with climate change to be able to justify the thing. So they're huge threats that exist from the way that capitalism is going. It's not a rational system. I have arguments, I had one yesterday with someone who's involved in refugee action. They've got a campaign, it's a good campaign. They say that every asylum seeker should have the right to work. Yeah? And they're going, look, we've got 150,000 NHS workers we can't fill the posts for. We've got loads of public sector jobs at the moment going that they can't fill the jobs for. Wouldn't it make sense to let those people waiting for an asylum claim to have a job? And I go, they'll never do it. They'll never do it. Why won't they do it? Not because it's not rational, and for us that would be a rational thing to do, wouldn't it? But capitalism isn't rational. This is about an ideology to drive forward, and more important than human life, more important than providing public services to people or making sure that they exist properly. It's more important that they control the message, that they divide people on grounds of race, and that they put an image in that actually these people are the enemy. These asylum seekers, these refugees, they're not the same as us, they don't deserve the same as us. And therefore we have a huge battle on our hands, we have a huge battle on our hands at the moment. As I said, one of those battles is still there over the policy to Rwanda. We have to make sure that it's unworkable. A few months ago, we managed to do what some other cities had done. We actually went down, supporting Stand Up to Racism, went down to where the immigration officers were trying to take two people away, and we stopped them doing it. Yeah, we need to be involved and organised and part of those wider anti-racist movements, and give leadership to those movements to be involved in challenging racism and challenging and supporting and defending refugees. And I think we'll be, hopefully in the winter appeal coming up now for Care for Calais, we'll be trying to support and raise money, because it isn't just about the money, it's about organising to be able to say to people, these people have a right to be here, they should be supported. It's about winning that argument with other working class people, that that's what needs to happen. And we need to be able to mobilise against any threat of the far right. I mean, there's talk of Maloney wanting to come to visit Britain, because she's worried that there isn't a large fascist organisation in this country. There's a reason why there isn't. It's because we, along with others, have mobilised people in the United Front in Stand Up to Racism to oppose the EDL, to oppose the BNP, and we've seen them off for now. But only for now, because racism doesn't go away. We only we only stop it for a certain period of time in a certain direction, it comes up again unless we get rid of the system that creates it. And that's the bigger task for all of us. We have to get more and more people that see the link between fighting capitalism for our wages, for our cost of living, for our humanity. It's not true to say that somehow there's white workers over here and there's black workers over there. No, 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 no. Go down any picket line, they're black and white workers together that are fighting for a pay rise. But we also have to fight against racism and all forms of oppression at the same time if we want to create a better world for all of us.